Is Sarah Coles, and I am the Executive Director of the Texas Children in Nature Network. And welcome to our webinar today, More Green Time, Less Screen Time. We're excited to have you with us. We are recording our session today. Thank you so much for joining us. To save bandwidth for all of our attendees and for a clean recording, we ask everyone to turn off their cameras and mute themselves during the presentation. I will be monitoring the chat, so you can share your questions there, and I'll share them with our presenter. Also, please remember to keep your comments kind in the chat. Mark Broughton is running tech for us today, so thank you very much, Mark. We will share the recording of today's webinar in a follow-up email. We'll also be sharing the slides, so if you would like those, we will be sharing that in our follow-up email as well. If you're uncomfortable with your name showing, you can change your name to anonymous and private message Mark with your name for our attendance. Also, if your Zoom name doesn't match the name you registered with, please change your name or let Mark know. If you need a certificate, we do need to have your name, and so that needs to match the name that is on your Zoom, or we won't be able to give you a certificate. And then for the certificate, you'll email the email address that was in the Zoom link email that you got, and we'll get you those certificates. I'm going to go ahead and do our land acknowledgement. Texas Children in Nature Network is headquartered in Austin, and as such, I'm on the ancestral and unceded land of the Tonkawa, Comanche, and Sauna people. Our ongoing colonial presence on Indigenous lands compels us to take action now to counteract the effects of colonization. The work we do through the Texas Children in Nature Network is one small step towards that effort. And I'm going to put some links in the chat in just a moment on land acknowledgements. And I'd like to go ahead and welcome our speaker today. Sarah Nielsen is with SG Wellness, and welcome, Sarah, and I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I appreciate that. It's so good to be here with y'all today, and thank you to Texas Children in Nature for having me. As Sarah mentioned, my company that I have here in Austin, Texas is my private practice. So I am an educator and a board certified health and wellness coach. So my master's degree is in health education. My undergraduate degree was a combination of outdoor education and health education. So kind of blending those two, bridging the gap there. And I have been a health coach for over 10 years. And so the conversation we're going to have today is going to be through the behavior change and biophobia lens, in that we want to make sure that we are creating new opportunities for children, for families here in Texas and across the country to engage with nature in new ways that sparks their curiosity and sparks their interest and helps them to develop a lifelong relationship with nature. So for the purpose of our conversation today, Green Time and how I'm presenting it to you is not achievement or performance based. It is more about, again, creating those intentional experiences that lead to curiosity, lead to a budding interest with nature that can really set us up for a lifetime. So it's my goal today to share with y'all some of the practices and experiences that I have found success with in my private practice here. I've had the pleasure of working with some organizations here in Austin, including the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, to offer some green time classes for them in summer camps and also on spring breaks. And so again, sharing these successes with the idea that y'all can get some inspiration, put your own remix on it and bring it to your kiddos, your families, your communities, and really start to, like, pun intended, plant those seeds and get that going. So here, oops, see here. There it is. Whoops, whoops, whoops. There we go. Here's our overview today. So the first part of our conversation, again, is going to be through that behavior change and biophobia lens. We're then going to get into what's called dose response. You know, how much nature do we need for it to feel effective, for things to start happening for us emotionally and physically, with those benefits of spending time in nature that we know about. Then we're going to shift gears, and I'm going to show you images directly from Green Time lessons that I've facilitated in the past. We're going to have material lists. We're going to have lesson structure. Again, I want y'all to take this, use it, put your remix on it, and figure out kind of what your next steps are going to be when you think about offering nature experiences that create curiosity, interest, all that good stuff. And then at the end, hopefully we'll have some time for a nice discussion or questions. And so with that, let's get started. This is a beautiful oak tree in Texas. It's probably about 2 blocks away from where I live. This is one of my favorite places to go. But let's talk about, the topic at hand, getting kids outside, more green time, less screen time. We know this is an issue. We know that screen time is here to stay. We know that nature deficit can really have a negative impact on children, their brains and their bodies, their social skills, et cetera. And so now we're going to turn from awareness and advocacy to action steps. And that's my goal for us today. And
Sarah,
yes, ma'am.
real quick, sorry. I think we're having a couple issues with folks seeing your screen. So maybe if we stop the share and
Oh, sure.
restart the share,
Thank you. Weird.
see if that fixes the problem.
How's that?
Okay. Mark, can you see the screen? I can see it. I just want to double check.
I can see the screen, yes.
Okay, perfect. So I think we should be good.
Okay, very good. The only thing that y'all missed, if you didn't see it before, were just these like snapshots of news clippings. We know that green time, screen time is a conversation, and why we need nature. And so from an education standpoint, the greatest gap in life is the one between knowing and doing. This is true with other health behaviors. So when we think about nutrition, when we think about physical activity for kids, when we think about sleep hygiene, oral hygiene, like we know that we need to spend time in nature. We know we need to take care of our bodies and brains, but for some people, there's a little bit of a gap between knowing and doing. And that's what I'm hoping to fill today. This is the knowing doing gap, right? So that bridge that we want to create between those two things. But if we take that a little bit further and peel back those layers, we can see that some of the hurdles getting in the way between knowing and doing, incorrect assumptions, really assuming that we know that maybe something isn't going to work or it's going to be negative or whatever it might be. So those incorrect assumptions can be some hurdles that we run into. Also a fear of failure. That's a more personal thing that we deal with our self-efficacy, our self-esteem. So really considering those personal, private, individual layers that people may be bringing, kids may be bringing, parents may be bringing to these nature experiences. And then when we look at it from a systems approach, we're seeing can't, won't, and don't know how, right? So with the can't barriers, we have the knowledge, but our practices and policies do not support these changes. From a won't barrier, it means that we have the knowledge, but we are not willing or committed to do anything about it. And the don't know how is, we have good intentions, but we lack the knowledge. And so I think take a moment with this and sort of self-identify maybe where you fall in this moment, whether it's you personally, your organization, your school, your kid group, whatever it might be. So just sort of giving some context to that knowing doing gap. And then also the emotional part, right? Of like, I don't want to do this by myself. This is weird. I feel uncomfortable. Just those fears and that negative self-talk that can get in the way of spending time in nature for our well-being. So here's our video. We're going to try it out today. It should work, but this is going to be a little mini live lesson for us right away. So if you want to have something to write with, something to write on, I am going to play this video for y'all. We're going to take a virtual field trip out to California to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, the live jelly cam. I did check on the jellies earlier today. They are alive and well. They're floating around. So let's just take a moment and kind of give a little mini pledge to yourself. Refrain from multitasking for about 30 to 45 seconds. Please don't check your phone. Please don't check your email. Just let zen out, zone out, and check in on the jellies. Right. The jellies are doing well at the aquarium. So moving ahead, I want you to reflect for a moment as I get to my next slide here. There it is. So how do you feel after pausing to watch the jellies? And if you are struggling to find the words, here are some right here. So this
We
is
have
called,
from, oh, sorry, go ahead.
yes.
I was going to share, Amanda said relaxed in the chat.
Oh, very nice. I love this live participation. Yes. Okay. So after pausing to feel the jellies, how do you feel? This is called the feelings wheel, the emotions wheel. This is something that I use in my private practice for emotional well-being, physical well-being. And I want to take the time to acknowledge that our vocabulary is very small when it comes to explaining how we feel. And particularly with kiddos, we can be like, how did it go? How are you feeling? How was your day? Fine. Good. I'm good. I'm fine. I'm good. I'm fine. And it kind of like ping pong back and forth. The benefit to having the vocabulary to explain exactly how we feel has a twofold benefit. Number one, we can feel more heard and more understood by other people when we can share exactly how we feel. And then the second side to that is that people understand us. So it's this very like reciprocal relationship when we can expand our vocabulary to the emotions and the sensations that we feel when we interact with nature, whether it be on a screen. I acknowledge that that's what we're doing today, but also taking versions of the emotion wheel outside with you for your lessons, for your nature experiences, and almost doing like a before and after check of whatever your nature activity is. How did the kids feel at the beginning? How do they feel now? How do they feel in the middle? So again, just a little pause to see how you're doing as you take in some nature that we are not used to in Texas. This is another iteration of some feelings wheels. The sources are there. We can see Texas Rising Star, mental health children, different wheels for different age appropriate kiddos. So the wheel that I showed you initially would be more for teens and adults. These two wheels that we see in front of us, more of the preschool, little kids, and then the elementary, upper elementary kiddos as well. So everybody has a feeling wheel that they can access for their specific group. There are so many online, y'all. Like I do encourage you to take the time, search out what feels good for you. Some are laminated, some are big, small, etc. So again, lots of ways to check in with kiddos' emotions as they experience nature and helping them to connect the dots with how nature makes them feel, because that creates a little bit more of an intrinsic motivation and internal motivation to interact with nature in a meaningful way. So let's talk about the biophilia, biophobia spectrum. Biophilia is known as sort of this innate human ability to connect with nature and other living things. Whereas on the opposite end of that spectrum, we have biophobia, which is a fear or a dislike of nature. And I would also add to this conversation a disinterest in nature. And we're going to talk about why that is here in a little bit. But really assessing where we are on this spectrum is very important, not only as instructors and educators, but to get also an understanding of where our students and our families are lying as well. And so the photo that I'm choosing for today for this specific biophobia conversation is a snail. I took this photo in my front yard, I think last summer, but here in Austin, Texas, when it rains in the summer, all the snails emerge onto our houses and our sidewalks and our driveways, and they're just sliding around. That is a nature moment. That is something that we can look forward to, that we can go out and watch, and kind of have these moments of cause and effect. Like it rained in Texas, the snails are out, let's go take a look at it. And so as a mini assessment for yourself right now, let's sort of self-reflect to identify, or to begin to identify, your nature boundaries, what you're comfortable with and what you are not comfortable with. Once we've identified boundaries, then we can start to fill in those gaps with programming and opportunities that are appropriate for where that person is, kiddo, adult, or anywhere in between. Let's think about the snail. Would you pause to observe the snail? If you left your house, you went for a walk and you saw this beautiful spiral shell, all of these patterns, and this snail just gliding across the grass. So it's a yes, no question. Would you pause to observe the snail? And if you said yes, how long do you think you would stand there to look at it? Would you stand for maybe like 10, 15 seconds? Or would you be there for 2 to 5 minutes watching it, the pace that it goes, watching its little antennas, and really kind of observing that snail? So that's a visual boundary. Physical boundary, would you let the snail crawl on your hand? For some of us, that's a hard no. For some kids, that's a hard no. That's icky, it's slimy, it's gross, whatever. But understanding where those boundaries are from an emotional perspective is so huge, because then we're able to create opportunities for kids that don't scare them, that don't intimidate them, that allows them to build a meaningful relationship with nature. So taking this to the next level, snakeskin. This was also in my yard. So finding this, kind of a similar thing, if you came across it, would you pause to observe it? Would you take that in? From a visual standpoint, are you okay with that, or are you creeped out? The texture piece, the touch piece, would you pick up the snake skin and like feel the texture and see the fractals and everything? Or is that gross or something, like, does it set you off in a weird way? And so kind of, again, thinking about what are your boundaries, what boundaries are kids having and coming to these nature experiences with? And I think that that's worth reflecting on. So now we're going to pivot to talk about our evolving relationship with nature. I'm sure a lot of us have a lot of pictures like this on our phone, myself included. But this is the way it's going, right? So we want to document, we want to take pictures, either to share or keep for our private memories. But with this evolving relationship, we do prioritize screen time. We know that that's here to stay. It's why we're here today having this conversation. But further than that, we're starting to, not everybody, but we're starting to feel like nature is a luxury and not a necessity. And by that, I mean, we're going to save up all of our nature time for a big state park visit or a big hiking trip or a camping trip or summer camp or something like that. And we forget about the daily doses of nature, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes outside in nature that's nearby our home. We're going to get to location here in a little bit, but viewing nature as a luxury and not a necessity for our health is definitely a little bit of a detriment right now. We also have increased indoor living, which means like I'm in air conditioning right now. It's a warm day in Austin, Texas. Depending on where you live, you're in a temperature controlled house. You have a cozy bed, you have indoor plumbing. Like, we are used to being comfortable, and nature is not that. Nature can get us out of our comfort zones. It's hot, it's sticky. Sometimes it rains, it's muddy, it's dirty. And for kids that have spent a lot of time indoors, depending on their age, it's wild out there, literally, pun intended, and they're not quite into it for whatever reason. It makes them uncomfortable. So again, reflecting on that barrier as a contributor to biophobia. Weather connotations. This is a new one that I've been thinking about lately. I am a weather nerd, and I really enjoy watching the weather forecast. Like, every single night, I'm always on weather apps on my phone. But I've also noticed a trend where the weather person on the news has a negative slant anytime we get some rain, anytime we get some snow, anytime we get some ice, anytime we get a cold breeze. It's like, ooh, it's gonna be bad out there today. Don't go outside, that kind of a thing. And like, how are we absorbing that? How are we taking that on? Is that affecting our behavior? I can't say for sure. It's just an observation that I've had in the last few months. And so I wanted to share that with y'all today. And I'm curious if anybody feels the same way. Safety is obviously a concern in our evolving relationship with nature. Physical safety, environmental safety. Is it safe to go for a walk in your neighborhood? Are there green spaces close by within walking distance? All of that absolutely counts. Socioeconomic status, all of that absolutely falls under that safety umbrella. And then from a social media angle, we have the hashtag nature aesthetic, expectations versus reality. And let's talk about this slide. So expectations versus reality. This is the 360 bridge overlook in Austin, Texas. I got this picture from Unsplash, so I don't know this person. But essentially, let's game out like the two ways this photo could have been taken. Option one is you leave your phone in your pocket and you hike distraction free. You're not looking up on iNaturalist. You're not finding birds. You're not finding or taking photos to post live stream to Instagram of your hike. You are present in nature, distraction free, go up and somehow get this like perfectly timed shot of I'm alone in the woods, kind of a thing, and then come back down to your car without having interrupted your experience with the device, and go about your day. The second way is a little bit more common in that we have our phone out, we're taking photos, we're looking up plants, we're looking up birds, we're possibly sharing to Facebook or Instagram, whatever it may be. You get to the top of the hill, and it turns out, like Mount Everest, there is a line to get to the top now, or to get to this area where it looks like you're alone, but you're really not. And that's the sticky part about social media. It does not show the truth, it shows the highlight. And so when we get used to that, we can start to have perceptions of what it means to access nature. And by that, I mean, if we're only seeing these epic photos all the time of achievement, of performance, of I climbed to this tall mountain, I identified 50 birds, whatever it might be, we can start to think like, that's what I have to do to be a nature person. That's what I have to do to spend time in nature. And that's not the case, y'all. Like, we can spend time near our homes, near the green spaces closest to us, and get just as much from those nature experiences as something more epic that we typically see on social media. Again, social media is very performance or achievement driven as well. I've even talked to birders who have shared with me, like after taking classes like this, that they realized they were so focused on finding 3 more birds that day that they were not really present in nature. They were seeking, they were searching, their brain was elsewhere, and they weren't able to practice mindfulness in the moment, have a slower, more organic relationship with nature. It was, got to get 5 more birds. I got to get 5 more birds, that kind of a thing. Not everybody, but that's what I'm hearing. The other thing too, I'm a millennial, so we come from the generation of pics or it didn't happen, document or it didn't happen. And I think we've kind of been sleepwalking into taking pictures of everything, posting everything, needing to kind of categorize stuff, or we forget about it for whatever reason. So again, kind of checking, what are your behaviors? How often are you with your phone when you are also outside? And part of that, from my experience, I think it interrupts our experience in nature. If you take a photo and immediately go to share it, you're removing yourself, at least mentally and emotionally, from the nature space and getting back online. And so the goal is to check your habits a little bit, and do you have a healthy relationship with your screen boundaries? Do you have a compulsive need to always be checking your phone when you're outside? And so when we think about this, then we can think about then experimenting with new behaviors when it comes to green time and screen time. And so now we're talking about behavior change. So we are talking about developing your biophilia muscle. I like to call it a muscle, even though that's not what it is. But the idea of it is that a muscle gets stronger through repetition, through growth, through consistency of workouts or anything that you want to do. So if you're trying to enhance or strengthen your biophilia, we got to get the reps in. But we also have to have what's known as a growth mindset compared to a fixed mindset. This is a learning behavior change concept that we're going to be talking about next. So with the growth mindset, we're a little bit more optimistic. We're open to new experiences. There's less of a threat with new stuff. A fixed mindset is a little bit more closed off, a little bit pessimistic. I had one bad experience on a camping trip. I'm never going camping again. I sprained my ankle on a challenging trail. Hiking is no longer for me. And so we have to really be careful about how we manage those expectations of what it means to be outside, and how it can start to change our perception of what it means to have a relationship with nature. Back to that comfort zone thing, we are living in increasingly comfortable environments. Why would we want to leave the air conditioning when it's 99 degrees outside? And so kind of pushing against that growth edge, challenging what could come from being outside. What could I learn? What could I see? What good things could come from it? And then let's see, it's important just to slow down and be present in nature. We are so busy. We are so busy. And we can kind of get lost in that daily grind, that daily hustle, and slowing down to check in with the pace of nature is going to be good for our brains and our bodies. So the way that we do this, the way that we start to strengthen and flex that biophilia muscle is to start with curiosity. And when we think about curiosity, it's a learning technique. Curiosity leads to a growing interest in something, and that can really help with early years development. Getting kids excited about things, getting them interested in things lends itself to a deepening relationship with nature. If you can see the image on this screen, this is very much kid handwriting. This was from last year's spring break at the Wildflower Center for a green time session. This was not a prompt. This was just like I walked by, I saw that kid was having a beautiful moment with nature and click, took a little picture. And now it's here in my slide. So curiosity with nature has a lot of tentacles. It has a lot of arms. First is awe and fascination. The science of awe is very hot topic right now. Awe is something that you experience and you feel part of something greater. You understand kind of like how small you are in the world, how connected you are with others. The really big awe opportunity that we all have in Texas coming up is the solar eclipse on April 8th. That is the best example of awe. To be in that, to see the science that had to happen for this to occur and to experience it with lots of other people, depending on where you are, that's an awe moment when it comes to nature. Fascination is a little bit different. I'm going to get into that in detail a little bit later, but fascination is more about like zoning out on a beautiful view of trees, zoning out on a grass lawn, just sort of letting your brain get a massage, letting your brain take a break from digital life and get back into real life and practice fascination, which means just you're paying attention to what's in front of you. And then let's see what else. Exploration and courage is another outcome of curiosity. So exploration is what's around that corner. What's under this log? What's under this rock? Why are there so many bugs under here? You know, that kind of a thing. And so that can develop interest. That can develop a more thoughtful, deep relationship with nature. We also start to notice and observe how things work, how balance works, how buoyancy works, how long growth actually takes. Those types of things are all really beneficial for our kiddos' brains and for adult brains as well. My mouse is sticky today. Empathy, self-compassion, and patience, those soft skills, that social emotional learning, feeling empathy for an animal that died, feeling self-compassion for, you know, how long it takes for a bluebonnet to actually grow. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a few days. We can learn about what it means to have sustainable growth. We can also practice patience with anybody that has like a vegetable garden or an herb garden at their school, planting those seeds and having patience and coming back and watching the seeds grow and change. That's such a moment, like for kids to be able to see that real time change and pace of nature, as opposed to the digital pace that we are so used to, which is instant, on demand, all the time. Also with nature curiosity, establishing a mindfulness practice, which is essentially just being in the moment with where you are, being present. Earthfulness is a arm off of that. That's coming out of the Netherlands for a non-profit based group that I've been partnering with. It's the same thing, being present in nature, but specifically in nature, hence the earthfulness aspect. And again, we want to cultivate kids' interest in nature because that propels them forward to seek out new things that they're interested in, create that depth of learning for whatever they get excited about. And it all stems from allowing that curiosity to happen. So here's the growth mindset when it comes to nature. We can see at the very bottom, it's very much like, I won't do it, I can't do it. Once we can kind of create opportunities that aren't intimidating or uncomfortable for kids, they can start to open up, especially if that kid specifically is more geared toward screen time. How can we do this? Maybe I'll do it. I can try, I will, and I did it. So we need to be patient with that process, depending on the kid, depending on their biophobia, and allowing these new ways for them to interact with nature to come through. Here's another way of looking at it. So now we're getting into dose response. This is a nature pyramid where if you're a visual learner and you remember the food pyramids from back in the day, this is another way to think about it, right? So that daily dose of nature, we want to see at the neighborhood level. It's accessible, it's close by, it's something that we don't have to dedicate a lot of time and effort to. And then as we move up the pyramid, we can see like maybe some weekly exposure in the regional area, monthly exposure a little bit further out, and then annual exposure internationally. That's not realistic for everybody. So again, I want you to focus on the very bottom. The daily dose of nature in your neighborhood, nearby nature, is what we're really going for. Here are the numbers. Take this in while I take a sip of water. 1 second. This is dose response and behavior change. What this means is, of the nature research that's coming out, how much time do we need to spend time in nature? So we can see on the left-hand side of the screen, we've got duration and frequency, and then we've got location and behavior considerations to the right. So again, the general guidance for everyone is 20 minutes a day, 6 days a week, 120 minutes a week, 5 hours a month in a semi-wild space, 3 days a year in a little bit of a more wild space, again, that pyramid that we looked at. But so when we think about location and behavior considerations, 20 minutes a day in nearby nature, which is in close proximity to your school, to your classroom, to your home, something that you can access on a daily basis, different times of the day, different weather. Again, it's not a whole big to-do to access this nearby nature. The concept of a wild home came about during the pandemic when we were all spending a lot of time outside. And I think that's when the nature renaissance kind of started churning back up again. But the wild home is an emotional concept when it comes to spending time in nature. And what that means is that you've got a little slice of nature nearby that you can get to, and you go there so often that you get just as comfortable there as how you are, as comfortable as you are in your own home. And then you can start to notice season changes, animal changes, new critters. What does the wind do to my wild home? What does a rainstorm do to my wild home? What does extreme heat do to my wild home? And really getting familiar with that and using that as kind of an emotional support to cultivate patience, to cultivate self-compassion, dealing with change, dealing with difficult things, really kind of pausing to see what's going on around me and how can I ground into that. Also for Texas too, coming up, it's nice now, but it's going to be hot again this summer probably. Thinking about the concept of a noticing window. I got this from Richard Louv, who we know him as the author of many, many children and nature books. And he mentioned it on a call I was on probably last year. If it's too hot to go outside, if it's dangerous to go outside, if there's an ability issue, establishing what's called a noticing window in your house, in your classroom, wherever it is that you are, where we go to look outside at a tree. And y'all can't see me, but I've got a big window in my office. There's some trees out there. So even if I can't go outside, I can look and see, even in the last week, how many new leaves have sprouted on these trees out in front of me. I can notice that. I can watch things change and still have this emotional connection with the outside. So again, if the conditions are not right for physically being outside, we can still emotionally connect with nature as well. And that's worthy. That's definitely important as well. Let's see what else. Biophilic design, that's just incorporating nature into infrastructure and architecture. And so seeking that out, especially if you live in a more urban environment and you don't have a lot of green spaces around you, seek out to see where are the rooftop gardens, where are the little community gardens, what's on the boulevard, maybe the pots on the side of the road, or planters, excuse me, and just sort of seeking out what you can find. 5 hours a month in a semi-wild space. I consider a semi-wild space here in Austin to kind of be like the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. And the reason I say that is because there are groomed trails, there are restrooms available, there's staff available, there's kind of this emotional safety baked into it, that experience, compared to if you just plucked somebody into the backcountry. That might be really stressful if they are anxious or if they have a big startle response. that's not where we want to start. And so again, that biophobia, that sweet spot of creating experiences for people and kiddos that make them feel safe, allow them to like let their guard down, be curious, and get interested in nature. That emotional hurdle can be a big thing. And then 3 days a year in a backcountry or wild setting, again, keeping that biophobia angle in mind. Okay, so quickly talking about some of the main outcomes that come from green time sessions. So we have improved cognitive performance and we have enhancing physical and emotional well-being. And the two theories that come from this are attention restoration theory, and that was coming out of the University of Michigan, I believe, but suggesting that mental fatigue and concentration can be improved by time spent in nature or by looking at nature. And so when we can take a break from the screens, go into the green, and then come back to the screens, we're going to come back a little bit more focused, more refreshed. It's almost like your brain gets a massage when you're able to practice soft fascination and look at fractals, like these basil plants here on the picture. Fractals are repeating patterns in nature. So we can watch this basil plant change. That's practicing soft fascination. Notice how the leaves come up in sets of two in opposite orientation. That's soft fascination and picking out those fractals. And kids are really good with patterns, seeing things kind of how they're arranged. And that's a fun way to engage them and get their interest in nature, aside from just plant identification or some kind of achievement or performance based with it. Sometimes it's okay to just stare and look and notice. Stress reduction theory is another component of green time as well, but basically arguing that natural environments reduce mental stress while artificial environments induce mental stress. And their big study with that came from, what's it called? A study from, again, the University of Michigan. View from a window may impact recovery from surgery. And two hospital groups, everybody had their gallbladder removed and they were recovering in the hospital. Group one had a hospital room with a window and a view of trees. The other group had a room with a window and they had a view of a brick wall. So the people that had a view of nature out their window, this noticing window, requested less pain medication. They had better moods with hospital staff and they were discharged 2 to 3 days earlier compared to the brick wall surgery patients. And so that led to more window studies. We need windows in schools. We need windows in offices, that biophilic design component. So again, even if we can't be outside, can we still view nature? Can we still engage with it emotionally and have that benefit as well? So thinking about the concept of green time for burnout, for emotional overwhelm, for physical emotional fatigue, thinking about how we want to use that and leverage that for our emotional well-being and our physical well-being. So we're doing good on time. We are back at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, and we are diving into examples from green time lessons that I facilitated here. And so with green time, the way I'm presenting it to y'all, there are kind of these anchor components, and then we've got some flexibility in the middle of how you want to facilitate to your groups and to your kiddos. So this is a sample structure. The goals here, again, cognitive restoration. We just talked about that with attention restoration theory. Unplugging, balancing out screen time, just as a minute by minute basis. And then practicing sensory awareness and generating curiosity and interest in nature. So those are the goals of any kind of green time session. Each green time session, to kind of like make it formal, to create a beginning, a middle, and an end of that lesson, we're always going to start with a series of breathing exercises, and I'll show you that just here in a little bit, but it helps to let the kids kind of get some energy out, bring their heart rates down, bring their excitement down, breathing exercises, and sort of grounding into the moment, being present. And with that, we've got branch breathing and sensory noticing, and I've got slides for that coming up. Then, after we've grounded, after we've kind of settled into the lesson, after the breathing and the sensory stuff, we're going to then give them, the kids, an opportunity to practice autonomy. There's a menu of green time activities that changes out and they can pick what they want to do with their time while parallel playing. Sometimes there's group work, sometimes there's solo work, but again, having that autonomy helps to lend itself to that biophobia angle so that they can feel like they do something that's meaningful to them in nature. And that's really what matters, is establishing that personal relationship with nature that carries over for a lifetime. And then to close, again, the beginning, middle, and end of the session. With the end of the session, we've got the same breathing exercises again, and then a couple of options for noticing, a couple of options for kind of embodying animals, that whole like a bug on a rug thing. I'll show you that in a second. Practicing mindfulness or earthfulness. So that's sort of the loose framework of a green time session. Let's talk about tools. So these are the mats that we used at the Wildflower Center. If you have access to these with your groups, with your kids, please lean into them. When we were using these in the summer, we started by brainstorming, how can we use these to keep cool? And the kids had wonderful brain activity with that, of like, it's shade, it's a heat barrier, it's a fan. Like there's all these different ways to use this simple piece of equipment to engage kids in that nature self relationship and how they can like cool their bodies down when it's a heat advisory out there. Also, let's see, it's a canvas as well. I'll show you how we use that in a second, but it's waterproof. It's got a little bit of firmness with that foam that they can like transfer things around, carry things around like a tray. You can also balance on one finger, you can balance on your head. There's a lot of different ways to use these mats in this scope for green time. And then ice. Ice is my other hack, my other trick that I use, especially in the summer. This is the cooler. This is the refrigerator, or the ice from my refrigerator. We of course want shade, right? Through the activity mats, wearing hats, tree shade, anything that we can get to lower that temperature down. Everybody's got a water bottle now, so making sure that the kids have that. We can do a group brainstorm on signs of dehydration. What does it feel like when you haven't drank enough water? You get a headache, your mouth is dry, you might be a little bit cranky. Demonstrating how to take a slow motion sip of water, which essentially just means I'm going to take a little sip of water, I'm going to feel it go down my neck and down into my stomach and have that mind-body connection. And that's just an interesting little mindfulness moment that you can pepper in to that lesson. And then let's get into ice and towels. So my notes that I wrote on my lesson plans for myself: bring extra ice, they will ask for more, they will drop it, and they will ask to put it in their mouths. So just like expect that, right? The boundary with putting ice in your mouth, the way that I explained it to them, as I said, this cooler is not clean, it's dirty, this is not edible ice. And they, for the most part, respected that. There's always one or two though, you know. They will drop it though, it'll get dirty, they're going to ask for another one, have a towel so they can wipe their hands off if their hands start to get dirty. Again, addressing that biophobia layer, making everybody comfortable. When we use ice, when there's a heat advisory or heat concerns, especially coming up in the warmer months, we learn about how to cool your body down with ice cubes. So putting ice cubes on your wrists, on your pulse points, your temples, the back of your neck, behind your knee. And then we do something called the armpit challenge. If you're feeling really brave, put an ice cube in your armpit. And there's usually a handful of kiddos that get really excited about that and they have a whole moment. You can also use ice cubes intentionally for a mindfulness practice as well. Watching a cube of ice melt on the ground, on the mat. What does it look like? What does it do? What direction does the water flow in? Like all of that stuff is primed for developing curiosity and interest with nature. And I will say with the ice component, especially, once we break the ice out at the beginning of the outdoor lesson, the kids go from cranky and moody to comfortable and chill instantly. They're able to cool their bodies off, they understand it, and we were able to be outside for probably about 45 minutes in a heat advisory in July in Austin, Texas. And that's a big deal. Like when we think about how can we be outside safely, we have to cool their bodies down, and ice cubes are just such an easy way to do that. And then also they're appreciated too. This is a little thank you card I got from bringing ice for Camp Wildflower last 2 summers ago, I think. And just a nice little reassurance of, it is appreciated. It does make a difference, and it can address that biophobia layer of kids feeling like it's too hot, I'm uncomfortable, I don't want to be outside. This gets rid of that. All right, so now we're in the outdoor classroom. This is the Wildflower Center last year over spring break. We had really nice weather. We did have some rain that we had to kind of work around, but this is the blank canvas that I started with. And then this is the final product. And so looking at creating like an activity hub for the green time session. The materials, as you can see, are off to the side. So we want nature journals, we want markers and pencils. The Wildflower Center supplied little cheap plastic magnifying glasses for kids to really zoom in on patterns and fractals. As you can see, there's a rock in that wood bowl on the table. That's to sort of illustrate fractals. Kids can draw it, they can observe it, they can just zen out with that. I do have a speaker that I use sometimes, a little Bluetooth speaker on the table where I connect with nature noises like birds, thunderstorms, sometimes wind chimes, just depending on the day, depending on where we are, sometimes that can help to enhance the experience a little bit. We've got some mats on the table. It did rain that day. So some plastic mats on the benches of those tables. And then the green time menu, which I am going to zoom in on next. Here's the menu. So just some string wrapped around a couple of tree branches. And then I'm using a binder. This is what it looks like. Little green time class binder. So all of these are in sheet protectors. Some of them are seasonal, some of them are consistent, but I can just hang the ones that I want to emphasize that day. The third one in that orange looking thing, that's mandalas. Spirals are right next to it. There's a weather prompt, just kind of some reminders of why nature is good for us. And so really addressing like different levels of physical and emotional well-being, depending on what you're wanting to emphasize. You might want to like tie it in with your existing lesson plans, or you just might want to have a mindfulness moment, and that's okay too. But knowing that there's probably, several of these choices, but not, what's that word? Analysis paralysis, right? Where we have too many choices. So giving kids the autonomy to choose how they want to spend their time with this session, again, really fosters interest in nature, creativity in nature, etc. So let's see what else. Now we've got the nature log. So that's a really lovely piece when we start and end a green time session. So I've got my whiteboard, I've got the date, the temperatures that don't mess with Texas thermometer right there, some quotes, question of the day, just all of those things for kids to be able to work on individually while class is getting started. So they can decorate the cover of their nature journal, they can take their nature log. That's a really lovely space and place orientation. This can be done in nearby nature, in that wild home, through the noticing window, but connecting yourself with the outdoors by taking these observations. How does it make you feel? What's the temperature outside? What's your favorite kind of rain? Like looking at nature in different ways. These are daily mindfulness observations, weather checks, emotion feeling checks, again, that feelings wheel down below. So that's that. Now let's talk about branch breathing. So branch breathing is what we do at the beginning and the end of the session to bookend it. And it's Tai Chi inspired, like breathing and arm movements. And I tell the kids to get into what's called a squirrel stance. Squirrels have great core strength. They have great balance. When you see a squirrel like up on its hind legs and its arms are kind of tucked in, its shoulders are directly over its hips, that's the body position that we want to be in while we're doing branch breathing. And so again, kind of letting kids get some energy out and kind of get into that squirrel stance. And basically all you're doing, I'm going to move my camera a little bit, but with branch breathing, we're starting in the squirrel stance and I'm breathing in and then I'm exhaling. And that's kind of the Tai Chi inspired, right? So when we inhale, we're combining that arm movement and we're going back down. So I'll do this up and down for probably like 8 to 10 repetitions while everybody gets the hang of it and starts to get into the rhythm of the breathing. And then once we do that, we start to use our arms as branches. And so you inhale, like one arm's going to come up, it's going to go down, Then the other arm is going to come up, it's going to go down. And then both arms are going to come up and they're going to go down. We go out to the side, both. And then what we do is called a ninja squirrel, which is like to the side and then back down and then to the side and back down. And then you're like making a wave. And it's really fun to see the kids' eyes light up when they think about a concept of a ninja squirrel, like doing Tai Chi. And it's a way for them to be silly in nature and not be so serious. We're coordinating breath with movement. By doing that, we're activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your relax, rest, and digest system. You're expanding the belly when you breathe. This is all just like bringing the energy down, allowing kids to be able to be present in nature. It is a stress reduction exercise, and it helps us to ground and center. And then we do this at the end as well to, again, bookend the experience. And then let's see, the next thing that we do after branch breathing at the beginning of the lesson is we do mindfulness noticing, and I call it in a minute. And basically we go through these different sensory components for 60 seconds each. I'm keeping a timer with my watch while the kids are doing this, and we're demonstrating how to use our senses. And so owl eyes is literally just little binoculars looking around. What do you see with your owl eyes for 60 seconds? What do you notice? What are we looking for? Big, small, little? What's green? What's brown? What's red? Like anything, any kind of prompt you want to give them, find that with your owl eyes. Deer ears is the hearing sensory. So having your hands behind your ears creates that cup of noise that you can hear even more when you do this. And then the special trick of turning your hands backwards and listening to what's behind you. And that's a really fun, like, sensory thing that they can do to hear cardinals and traffic and trees and whatever it might be. The snake tongue and the raccoon paws is more for the touching. Snake tongue is like a very, that sort of a thing where you're sticking your tongue out. Can you feel the sunshine? Can you feel the wind? Just a nice little like moment of pretend. Raccoon paws if you want to use your hands. And then the coyote nose as well. So what do you smell? Do you smell dirt? Do you smell trees? What do these flowers smell like? You know, those kinds of things where you tap into your senses. So again, 60 seconds for owl eyes. Then we talk about it. What did you hear? 60 seconds for deer ears. What did you get from that? You know, and then we kind of move through. Then we get to the autonomy of the lesson and the green time menu. So this was a day that we had a heat advisory. You can see my cooler in the middle. The ice is always accessible. It's always ready for those kids. They really don't need to double or triple dip. They usually can lower their temperature that first round and not need to go back for that ice. But again, that emotional reassurance of if they start to feel uncomfortable, biophobia, they can cool themselves down. They learned how to do that. So that's that. And then let's see, just more examples of lessons. So this was a free play. Somebody decided to make a bug hotel. The rule that I have for working with loose parts on the ground is that it has to come from the ground. They're not allowed to pick leaves, flowers, anything that's currently living. Everything has to come from the ground. And that's a respect thing with nature. We've got some parallel play on the right side. We've got one kid doing some nature journaling. The other one is just sort of zenning out and looking at the trees, which is really lovely too. So again, that's why green time is not performance or achievement based. It's very much just existing and developing your relationship with nature. Let's see what else. We also did in summer camp some pre-assigned groups. So 4 groups, the different drawings on the popsicle sticks. And so I passed those out as we were doing the in the minute sensory activity while they were all spread out, making sure that kids were mixing and not getting stuck with their usual camp friends. And their challenge was to make a mandala, incorporating their popsicle sticks. And then they had about 30 minutes to do that, 25, 30 minutes. Really some elaborate, amazing designs. And then we would go around and tour the gallery of the mandalas. So we would kind of travel in a pack, and each team would elect a representative to talk about their design, what it means, all the components. And y'all, this is like my favorite thing to do because their creativity comes out and their storytelling comes out. And it's wild, like some of the things that they can think of. And again, there's no performance, there's no achievement. Somebody asked me last summer, who's the winner? Who won? How do we know who wins? And I just said, it's a creativity flex. That's all it is. There's no winner, there's no points, there's no grade, there's no nothing. You can just do this and be proud of what you did. And then after we're done, we just tip it up, drop it back into the ground, and then put the mats on our heads or balance them and walk back into the classroom to journal about the experience. This is a solo mindfulness mandala day. This was a spicier group. We had some kids that weren't getting along. And so instead of a group activity, we turned it into a solo activity. These kids were silent. They were focused. They were in the zone, just enjoying their time in the shade. Another heat advisory day, cool and comfortable, having a great time. This is when we go back into the classroom if we were outside because of a heat advisory, or if that's what your structure is. We talk about fractals, we journal the experience. Kids are able to talk about what their wild home is. I ask them to think about, where's your wild home? Where's the place of nature? Is it your backyard? Is it a tree? Is it a blah, blah, blah? And they're able to journal about that. And then they can draw a picture of their mandala after they're done. And so it's a really nice recall of the experience, and then how they can process their emotions through the game Roses, Buds, and Thorns. Rose is your best experience of being outside that day. The bud is what you're looking forward to next time. And the thorn is maybe the thing that didn't go so well, but it's okay to have a positive and a negative experience at the same time, especially if you can see that it was a positive outcome. There's that. All right, so experimenting with green time. We want to consider our intentional actions and outcomes, structured play versus free play, certainly age considerations depending on the groups that you're with, and establishing physical and emotional boundaries to green time. I've had some classes where there are kids that only want to talk about Minecraft the entire time. And so redirecting their attention to, is that on a screen or is that in green time? Kind of reminding them of why we're here. Seasonal outdoors, pausing with purpose, these squirrels that kind of sploot in the summer and just watching them. Squirrels take breaks, we can too. Again, that noticing muscle like biophilia, getting those reps in, using that noticing window, practicing observations with nature, identifying a sit spot, a noticing window, reframing the concept of I'm bored versus I'm practicing stillness. And that's a big mental shift sometimes. So again, nearby nature, wild home, seasonal shifts. This is my living room. Like there's nature everywhere. We can look for it. We can watch it grow. We can go to greenhouses. We can have a noticing window. Touch grass is a new little saying and phenomenon with the younger generation. It means you're spending too much time online. Go outside and touch grass. It's a little bit of an insult, but it's also really interesting that that is part of their vocabulary now. Parks and community gardens, greenhouses, like a really lovely way to spend time with plants without going into a semi-wild space. Forest bathing, nature walks, grounding, all of that good stuff. Expect challenges though with this, expect reroutes and detours, trial and learning, the difference between a risk versus a hazard. Ole, Texas has really wonderful resources for that. I love these books. I know I'm speeding through at the very end. We learned a lot today. How do you feel? Let's check the emotion wheel one more time as you process this and think about interacting with nature in new ways and what that might be like. And that's what I've got for y'all today. So I'm going to stop sharing, I suppose, and then let's see.
We've got a couple of questions, Sarah.
Okay.
So the first one from Janine is, can you explain the concept of the wild home again?
Yes. So the wild home came about during the pandemic when there was a lot of unstable stuff going on in the world. We felt stressed out. We felt confused. We felt scared. But what did not change during the pandemic is the birds still migrated, flowers still bloomed. And so there's some peace, there's some reassurance, and there's some calm that can come with identifying a wild home and going there if you feel like your life is starting to get really stressful, and slow down with the pace of nature and seeing what that's like. The book that talks about that wild home is this one. It's called Connecting with Nature in a Time of Crisis. It's very small, but it was written specifically for the pandemic, and it does define and talk about the wild home. That's on the reference list.
Great. We have another question from Amanda.
Okay.
She says, I know this is for kiddos. Do you know any curriculums out there that can target adults as well as children?
Honestly, I use this for adults too. I think that everybody's a little bit nature starved and they have that perception of it has to be this epic experience for it to count. This is absolutely something that could be replicated for adults. To my knowledge, I'm the only one doing this right now. So I'd be curious to see if y'all find anything else of what's available that changes our perceptions of existing in and with nature.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That is all we have for questions that I see in the chat. We are right at 3 o'clock. I did put in the chat, everyone, our evaluation. Please take a few moments to fill that out. It really helps us share with our presenters, and all of us, a lot of us are educators, so we have a great love of evaluation. And then also I put our next webinar, which is Breaking Play Barriers, how to get out of your own way and let play lead the way. Thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate your time today. As I said earlier, we are recording the session right now, so we'll send that out in a link later along with these slides. And if you are feeling so inspired, you could come again at 7 o'clock this evening. And so
well, I will say, actually, Sarah, I thought Pam had a question. How long of a time frame do you give for the menu? So typically, even if I were doing an hour lesson, the autonomy time would be half hour to 25 minutes. If it's a 90-minute lesson, they're going to get 45 minutes. So again, just in relation to that pre and post bookending of breathing and grounding. So it may be 25 minutes, but that's kind of a nice opportunity for them too, not too long.
Perfect. Sorry, I missed that one, Pam.
That one just came in. Yeah, right at the very end. No worries at all. Thanks y'all so much. This is so awesome.
Thank you so much, everyone, and have a fantastic rest of your day. Go outside and enjoy our beautiful weather.
Yeah. All right. Bye, y'all. Have a great day.